Have you ever felt it? That sensation where a switch just flips inside your head and suddenly you're not you? It's like this sudden wave of anger or anxiety that just crashes over you, and it seems to come from absolutely nowhere. Well, let's dive into that. Because what if I told you that hidden inside all that chaos is a perfectly logical, even predictable pattern? A pattern that your brain is using to send you a crucial emergency signal. In this explainer, we're going to decode that signal. We're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden biological forces behind those emotional shifts.
So this right here is the central puzzle we need to solve. The very moment that feels like a total loss of control is actually your brain's last-ditch effort to gain control. It's messy, it's painful, for sure, but it's an understandable response to an imbalance you might not even realize is there. And we're going to see how your own intelligence, your rational mind, can sometimes act as a shield, ironically helping you ignore the body's early warnings and keeping you stuck.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about the real-world pain of this volatility. Then we'll get into the neuroscience of what I call the emotional avalanche and the nasty feedback loop that keeps it going. We'll explore why just trying harder or using willpower is basically set up to fail. And then we'll get to the good stuff, a practical toolkit for managing your internal resources. And finally, we'll completely redefine what emotional stability even means.
So let's start with the feeling itself, right? The day-to-day pain of these shifts isn't just about the outbursts. It's about that destructive cycle of confusion and regret that comes after, leaving you feeling drained, your relationships strained, and your motivation just gone.
A lot of people talk about this like they're two different people living in the same body. You've got your rational self, the you that you know, the one that's stable and logical, but then there's this reactive self, this unpredictable force that just hijacks the system. And after it's all over, you're left cleaning up the mess, buried in self-blame, asking that same awful question. Why? Why did I do that again?
And here is the absolute key. The reason this cycle is so hard to break is that we spend all our energy focusing on the symptom, the anger, the anxiety, the shutdown. We're trying to put out the emotional fire, but we're completely ignoring the massive gas leak in the room. You see, the solution isn't to fight the emotion head-on, but to find and fix the underlying imbalance that's forcing your brain to pull the fire alarm in the first place.
Okay, let's pop the hood and look at the actual machinery here. What is physically happening in your brain when that switch flips? I promise you, it's not random. It is a biological process, a kind of emergency system that's kicking into high gear. It all starts with something called allostatic load. The easiest way to think about this is like a debt that builds up from all the chronic, low-level stress you deal with. Not enough sleep? That adds to the load. Skipped lunch? Adds to the load. Had to bite your tongue in a meeting all afternoon? Yep, that adds to the load too. All this wear and tear slowly, silently lowers your brain's tolerance for stress, making you way more sensitive to things that wouldn't normally bother you. So to really get this, we need to know the two main players in your brain. First, you've got the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. Just think of this as the brain's CEO. It's in charge of rational thought, long-term planning, and crucially, emotional regulation. And then you have the limbic system. This is like the building's super-sensitive hair trigger alarm system. It's all about survival, threat detection, and raw emotion. Now, when things are going well, the CEO is firmly in charge of that alarm system.
So here's how that system fails, in 4 steps. It all starts in step 1, what's called the subthreshold state. This is where that allostatic load, the bad sleep, the stress, the hunger, is quietly draining the CEO's energy. Then comes step 2. A small, seemingly harmless trigger happens. A critical comment, someone cuts you off in traffic. Because the CEO is already exhausted, it can't manage the signal, and the limbic alarm system just screams threat. This leads to step 3, the emotional avalanche. It's a total system failure. The CEO goes offline, and the alarm floods your body with stress chemicals. And the real kicker? Step 4, the reinforcement cycle. The outburst gives you this crude, temporary feeling of relief. People back off, the pressure drops, and that actually teaches your brain that, hey, this destructive strategy kind of works.
Think of it like a giant dam. That allostatic load is like a constant, drizzling rain day after day, making the water level behind the dam rise higher and higher. Your prefrontal cortex is the dam, straining to hold it all back. The final trigger, that's like someone tossing a single pebble into the water. But it's just enough to cause a tiny crack that leads to a catastrophic breach. The dam didn't break because of the pebble. It broke because of the immense, sustained pressure that was already there. And this is where things get really insidious. It's not just a one-off event.
The emotional avalanche itself creates the perfect conditions for the next one to happen, trapping you in a self-perpetuating cycle.
Just look at how this vicious loop works. First, that emotional outburst burns a huge amount of your brain's primary fuel, glucose. So your CEO, the PFC, is now even more depleted than it was before. Second, your volatility makes the people around you anxious, so they start to pull back. Third, your ancient limbic system sees that social withdrawal as a massive survival threat. It's like being kicked out of the tribe. And that feeling of threat, it adds even more weight to your allostatic load, which in turn lowers your emotional threshold even further, basically setting the stage for the next avalanche. It's a brutal, incredibly effective trap.
Okay, this next part is so important, and honestly, it might bring you a little bit of relief. If you have ever beaten yourself up for having a lack of willpower or for not being able to just get a grip, this is for you. We're about to see why that entire approach was always going to fail.
So why does it feel that way? Why does it feel so totally out of your hands? Well, the simple answer is, because in that moment it is. That feeling of being out of control isn't just in your head. It's a measurable neurological reality.
The scientific term for this is ego depletion. And listen, this has nothing to do with your character. This is about biology. Your PFC, that brain CEO, it runs on energy, specifically glucose. And when you've been running on fumes from stress and poor sleep, it literally runs out of fuel. It doesn't have the energy to do its main job, which is to regulate your impulses. Your willpower isn't gone, its battery is just completely, totally empty. And when that battery is dead, a critical piece of software crashes: the ability to think about the future. A healthy PFC can look ahead, see the disastrous consequences of an outburst, and hit the brakes. But a depleted PFC? It can't see past the next 5 seconds. Its entire world shrinks to one single goal: find relief right now. And in that state, that huge impulsive reaction doesn't just feel like a good idea. It feels like the only option for survival.
Okay, so we get the problem. We understand the system. We see why our old strategies were never going to work. So now let's pivot to the good part, the solution. We're moving from diagnosis to action with a real, practical toolkit for managing your internal resources so you can start building real stability.
This path has 3 main steps. First, we have to become detectives of our own nervous systems by doing a system audit. Second, we have to proactively protect our energy by putting up some guardrails. And third, we need an in-the-moment tool called Active Decoupling to stop an avalanche right as it's starting.
The system audit is all about shifting your attention. Stop obsessing about the final trigger, the thing that sets you off. That's just the pebble. Instead, you need to look at the water level in the reservoir before the pebble was even thrown. Get curious about that sub-threshold state. Ask yourself the simple biological questions. When was the last time I ate? How was my sleep last night? Really? Was I just in a situation where I had to sit there and swallow my opinion for an hour? That's where the real answers are hiding.
So once you know what drains your battery, you build guardrails. This is about treating the energy for your PFC like a bank account, because that's exactly what it is. It's finite. You create non-negotiable, pre-committed rules to protect your resources before you hit the red. So a rule might be, the moment I feel my energy dip, I will eat protein, period. Or, no matter how much is left to do when my workday hits 8 hours, I am done. This isn't being lazy, it's being strategic. It's smart energy management.
But what if you feel it coming on anyway? What do you do in that exact moment? This is active decoupling. First, you have to create a mandatory pause. Just leave the room. Say you need a glass of water. Anything to break the immediate stimulus-response loop. Second, you reframe the feeling. You literally say to yourself, this intense feeling is not a fact. It is a biological signal that my resources are low. And third, here's a powerful physiological hack. Activate your vagal nerve. It's the body's emergency brake. Splashing cold water on your face or doing some slow 4-7-8 breathing sends an immediate all-clear signal to your brain's alarm system, and that can give your PFC just enough time to get back online.
So, as we bring all of this together, we land on a totally new way of thinking about what it means to be emotionally stable. It's a radical break from all those old ideas about character, or willpower, or just needing to be tougher.
I really want you to let this one sink in. Your emotional stability has absolutely nothing to do with whether you are a strong or a weak person. It is a direct, honest measure of how well you are managing your most basic biological and psychological resources. Those volatile emotions aren't a character flaw. They are an incredibly accurate, if painful, alarm system telling you that your non-negotiable needs for things like sleep, food, and safety are not being met.
And really, that's the final takeaway. Your goal is not to silence the alarm. Your goal is to put out the fire so the alarm doesn't have to keep ringing. The moment you start treating your energy, your sleep, your nutrition as the absolute bedrock of your mental health, the system can finally rest. The shifts will stop when your brain no longer has to scream to get your attention. The signal will stop when it's no longer necessary.